Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Interpreter Hub podcast. We're going to change the introductions up a little bit so you get to know us a little bit better. My name is Mark Rockford. You probably already knew that. I am the father of three, of course, husband of one. I studied Spanish and education, so I have a dual degree in that. I also had three minors. And ladies, I'm sorry, I am still married, right? So happily married after, goodness, it is going on 18 years at this point.
Whoa,
No, a
what a
long time,
warrior.
right?
Yeah.
Marriage takes love and definitely hard work. And of course, as always, I have Mateus. I am not quiet. I just have tech issues here with us today, so he
Hello,
can give us a
everybody. This
description
is
there.
Mr. French Fries here. Like always, please don't call me Fritas. If you call me Fritas, you're calling me French Fries in Portuguese. That's not nice. And I don't have half of Mark's resume, but I just turned 25 yesterday, and I look 45, and I feel like 65. But who cares, right? That's part of life. We are here today to discuss something very important. And no, that is not Mark's marriage. What are we here for, Mr. Rockford?
Wow. Well, there are some very timely issues. And one of the things that you guys are probably aware of is a political meeting that took place without an interpreter. It was an incredibly high stakes meeting. If you haven't watched the video on it, I would highly recommend it. It's very, very interesting. And I am, of course, talking about the meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky. Also, there was Vice President Vance in the White House, and it was a fiery meeting.
Crazy. Yeah.
Crazy. We're not going to discuss the politics too much, although that's going to be hard not to
But
do.
maybe one day we will. Not today. Today we're here to focus more on language, but there's no way to discuss language without mentioning the politics too.
100%, right? So you've probably probably seen some debates on LinkedIn and other places that would this have happened if there had been an interpreter present, because President Zelensky speaks English pretty well, but it's obviously not his first language, right?
Yeah, but I could understand him. And let's be honest, a lot of people were saying, like, trash talking his English, and I could understand him perfectly fine. I wouldn't like, if I were President Zelensky, that people was all around the internet saying that I don't speak English well enough, because I beg to differ. I understood his English very well.
Yeah, he spoke just fine. You could tell his comprehension is great. His English is definitely understandable. I cannot imagine the pressure of one, being a president, but two, if you've seen the pictures, like the video makes it seem like it's a very intimate setting, President Trump, President Zelensky, and Vice President Vance, but it was not. Like, they have a little bit of clear space around them, and then they are just surrounded by reporters and other folks, cameras everywhere. So it's very, very intense. And then on top of that, he was ambushed.
He was.
The language,
I totally agree with you. It's just a detail.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big detail. So imagine trying to speak not your native language, happens to me, high pressure situation, right? And people are using your words against you.
Exactly.
Right? That would be
like right
really
now,
difficult.
We're running this podcast here, and English is not my first language. It is Mark's first language, but it's clearly not my first language, and there's some kind of pressure, but there's a difference, right? Nobody from my country is being killed right now while we discuss, and for President Zelensky, that's the reality, right? So it makes things even more difficult.
Right? And I'm not twisting your words against you yet.
Yeah,
you reserve the right to do that in the future, right? But,
let's see if you can make it.
It's never too late, man, or never too early, right? So it was a crazy meeting. What struck me is not just the tone of the words, but also the words themselves, right? That were chosen by Vice President Vance and by President Trump.
Tone.
Very aggressive. There were phrases such as "You haven't shown any agreement," and when Zelensky said, or gratitude, and when Zelensky is like, "I've been nothing but grateful
all the time." Yeah,
I'm saying thank you all the time, and then they twist it and say, "But not in this meeting. You've never said thank you to us directly." Like, bow and.
What's sad, right? You could see Zelensky's facial expressions, right? You could see that he was feeling trapped. That's what happened. Like, my perception of it was awful for him.
His body language, right? Like, he started to cross his arms, and you could tell he
looked down. Not his head.
Right? What would have been different, Mateus, if there had been an interpreter present? What do you think?
I think he would feel more confident, for sure, because there is one thing when you're talking by yourself or when you're like answering a phone call, but when you're discussing something so complex like those matters, I think that having an interpreter could have changed the outcome. Maybe it would have changed, but I'm going to talk more about that later. But for you, Mark, what do you think would have changed if he had used an interpreter instead?
Obviously, it would have taken a slightly bit longer, right? But I think
Yes.
it would have also given him the advantage of being able to think a little bit more, process a little bit more,
Yes.
and respond, of course,
Slow
in
down
his
the pace.
native language, which would let him choose his words more carefully, and maybe they wouldn't have been able to twist his words as much against him.
As much, yeah.
But that, even with a super professional, incredible interpreter,
Yeah.
I really think they would have still twisted his words, right? And the
I think
interpreter
that
would
was
have
the
had
plan
an
all along.
immense amount of pressure. Can you imagine? The interpreter would have been blamed as well, right?
Yeah.
Like they would
I
have been
cannot
the
even imagine the
intermediary.
pressure. Yeah. Even if I were the interpreter, I would be in total shock at that moment because, you know, they were discussing something very complex. That's not easy. Like the interpreter who should be there would be a very talented and skilled interpreter.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. You definitely want somebody that's been doing interpretation in the United Nations, other high-stake political meetings, right? State Department cleared, all of that stuff, and we'll probably have guests in the future that could speak more to
Hopefully,
that
yeah.
than I personally can. But it was just crazy. So I think it would have helped at least prolong the meeting in terms of time and clarity and whatnot. Do I think that he could have changed how things went? Not really, because I think the
I
intent the
don't
whole
think so.
time was
Yeah.
theater, right?
Yeah,
Trump,
exactly. To
President Trump
expose him.
wanted to come out like, I'm the big bad, it's me. You could tell right away that JD Vance went into attack mode,
Same thing,
right?
yeah.
And maybe you can say whether you like them or dislike them, maybe you can say it's a negotiating tactic. They want to come on strong, but it left
At the
me
cost
with
of humiliating the other party. I don't understand why they did that to him because he was being respectful all the time. And, you know, they became aggressive all of a sudden and they kept being aggressive. Even though he was trying to explain, they wouldn't let him speak at all. Even if he had an interpreter, would they let the interpreter speak?
Yeah, I don't think so, because you're right. They did talk over him multiple times, right? And they kept putting words in his mouth, not just twisting what he was saying, but putting words in his mouth and trying to get him to accept an argument. You know, would you say it's true that your country has had trouble getting soldiers? Dude, every
He
country
can't say
in the middle
that.
of an invasion.
They'll
Yeah.
make him come out as a weak president. That's so many layers to this. It's so complex to talk about this topic. But we're going to give our best try today, right? I believe that debates are about perception as well. I don't know if you understand what I mean, but it's not just words. It's the way you portray yourself. It's also important. And President Trump, he has these traits of dominance. He's always very aggressive, very straightforward with what he has to say. And I felt that Zelensky was a little, you know, intimidated by that from the beginning.
I mean, again, it's tough, right? As we mentioned, it's not your native language. You're going there in the midst of a war with an ally who up until now has been just like unwavering support. And at this point, they want something, right? They're asking for mineral rights in your country. You're literally between, I mean,
come again, explain the part again. What did they want in exchange for the support?
Supposedly, what they want are some mineral rights. So there's, I believe, rare earth minerals in Ukraine that would be just a major boon to the United States, right? And so, to get their money back, I'm making quotes, right? The president wants the right to. I'm sorry, President Trump wants the right to those minerals, right? That's my understanding of the situation. Could be a little off, but I don't think so. I do want to clarify, like, if you're following the situation at all, if you're in the United States, the money, this is really interesting to me, did not go to Ukraine. It goes to companies in the United States primarily who produce the weapons, right? So, and we are back. I was having some major issues there. I guess there's something you have to say to me, Mateus?
Yeah, guys, this is what happens when you don't read our tech guide. Just like Mark, he helped write the guide, but it seems like he hasn't read everything, and there he is. He had major tech issues during our podcast. So if you want to avoid that while you are dealing with your very important clients, read our tech guide for free before we reach 3,000 subscribers to our newsletter, and then we're going to charge for that. Don't do the same thing Mark did.
100%. Learn from my mistakes. I wrote an article that you don't have to actually touch fire and get burned. You can learn from other people. My laptop battery appears to have finally given up its last life, so I will have to get new equipment, right? So, highly recommend investing in your microphone, your headset, and then the computer. So, yeah, I will go through the tech guide, right? Hopefully you guys have downloaded it. If not, please do get to it, because as Mateo said, we're limited to the first 3,000 people, and then we will start charging for that, because at some point, we do need to make some money to pay for subscriptions, our time.
Yeah, and just a correction to what Mark said. In fact, you cannot download the tech guide. It's only available on our website. So you just go to InterpreterHUB, and then you go to resources, and the guide will be there. And read it now, because later we will charge for that.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for sharing, and thanks for everyone's patience. It is crazy what happened, as we were saying, but I think we can close out the meeting topic between Zelensky and Trump. I think it's fair to say that an interpreter definitely would have helped things, but if the participants have an intent, there is no way that the interpreter will be changing the participants' intent for the outcome of the meeting. Right? They might help. Yeah. Smooth things over. They might help make things clearer. Make sure their word choice is, what it would have been originally, as opposed to, struggling in a language that is not yours. But politically speaking, I don't think that they would have made a difference here, because I do think this meeting was an ambush.
Yeah, I agree with Mark. I don't think that the interpreter would have helped a lot. It would have helped, but at the end of the day, I think that the outcome would still be the same, because Trump and the vice president, they were being very aggressive toward President Zelensky, and it makes me believe that they had planned that all along. So with the interpreter there, all right, we would have a slower pace for the meeting, but I still believe that the outcome would have been the same.
Yeah, 100%. And this has been a busy week as far as languages. There's also been an executive order making English the official language of the United States, which is a first. You might have thought that the United States had an official language. Up until now, it has not. It is a melting pot, and we have had just a ton of different languages that are all accepted. Those languages will continue to be accepted, but with English as the official language, it is to be seen what effects that will have. You still can't discriminate based upon nation, race, or origin, which means that you'll have to provide language support so that people can get the services they need, especially if those services are paid for by the government. But this might mean that there are less translations done, that English translations, well, they wouldn't even be translations, but documents written in English will be good enough. We will see. There's a lot of
changes. Like if English is now the official language, and you're mentioning that pretty much nothing is changing, what's really changing with that? Because I don't understand it. Why make it the official language if nothing is changing?
Perception, my friend, perception. This administration seems to be all about perception, right? We are America first. We live in a country that has the Gulf of America now, and English is our language, right? It's crazy. It's all about perception. It does seem to be attempts to erode protection and or rights of people that don't look like me and don't speak the language that I'm currently speaking, right? Which is very unfortunate, because the United States, we have a history of immigration, of languages other than English, of really having the best of the people that come to the United States from other countries. I don't think that there are very many people in the United States that can't trace back to their grandparents or great-grandparents who came to the United States from some other country. In my case, my forefathers were Italian, British, French Canadian, some American Indian or Native American. So, I mean, just a huge melting pot. Like, that's the word we've always used, right? And now it seems to be an attempt to standardize everything, one language, maybe give advantage to a certain group of people that might or might not be white males.
Maybe.
Yeah. So we'll see. There are lawyers that are specialized in this writing about it. If you are familiar with Bruce Adelson, He's on LinkedIn, and he's very concerned with language access. He is a lawyer and can give you some more in-depth legalese about what is taking place. The InHelp National, there's a Meryl Udelman who has headed up this fight, also as a lawyer, and she probably has an opinion piece out, so you can learn more about it. I'm more interested in how this is going to affect the interpreter.
Yeah, but that's the point. Like, Trump has been the president for what now? 2 months? I don't think, not even 2 months, and we have pretty much 4 years to go, right? How does that affect the language industry from your perception? Because you're much more experienced than me, and as far as you can see, what can you say will happen to us interpreters? Because I'm concerned about my profession now. You know what I mean? Immigrants are leaving the country. We work primarily for immigrants. So what's going to happen?
Well, that's where I would disagree. We don't primarily work for immigrants. If you work in immigration law, right, then I would agree with you, right? And that's a whole nother subject that we will actually push off, right? But there are a lot of U.S. citizens or permanent legal residents who speak languages other than English, whose primary language is not English, who would prefer to receive medical care in their primary language, because it's scary, as you guys know, going to the doctor and not being able to, as Zelensky, it's a high pressure situation, and having to think about something other than your treatment, other than your condition, other than your health, and try to express that in another language is tough, right? So there will still be a lot of demand.
I understand the demand and stuff, but thinking about Zelensky, so just so we can talk about him, why do you think he chose to communicate in English, even if he kind of like knew, I believe he knew he might struggle with English, especially in a situation like that? Why do you think
he had a choice? Do you think he had a choice?
Sure. I mean, if he wanted to use an interpreter, he possibly could have used the interpreter.
Do we know that? Like, I'm not sure. I mean, Trump might have said, you speak English, so we're not going to have an interpreter. I don't want anybody else here. I don't want to use an interpreter. I don't like using interpreters. I don't know, right? Could he have fought for it? Yeah, but if you're going to a country that's giving you aid and you want more aid, and you want to continue to, build a positive relationship, you're going to give in on a lot of points, right? So I don't know what happened, right? I don't know that he didn't have an interpreter with him that he was not allowed to use, right? I'd have to look at his past history to see when and where he has used interpreters, because he is pretty proficient. I have to check. For some reason, I think he's proficient more than English and Russian and Ukrainian. And I could be even wrong about that. So if you're a fact checker, let us know. That'd be wonderful.
I think Trump doesn't have a problem with interpreters, because I saw a video this week. I don't know from when that video actually is, but somebody was speaking English to Trump, and it was an Indian English accent. And for some reason, he wanted to use an interpreter. I could understand the Indian speaker perfectly fine, but Trump wanted an interpreter to interpret English into English. So that's crazy, right? I don't understand President Trump at all.
Well, I can't speak to President Trump or his mind, right? Like that is beyond my abilities. Yeah, that's crazy. So I don't know. Back to his latest executive order, or he's just churning them out left and right. So he could have done more executive orders since then. I don't know, right? But English being the primary language of the United States, I see it mostly affecting translations at this time, right?
How so?
Well, because if English is the official language, and if you can make an argument that the law no longer does not require you to translate documents into other languages, right? Because you can always just sight translate them. You can always just have an interpreter for them, and the doctor can summarize, and they can, interpret the summary, as has happened to many of our listeners, right? I think that there will be less pressure to get those vital docs, those important docs, into other languages. That said, it's really hard when somebody is face to face with you to not give them the language support that they need, because you can't turn them away by law. You still can't discriminate, right? And if you have somebody gushing blood or crying, or with a temperature, or an emergency situation, or going to school, or whatever the case may be, because there's a lot of situations where you still need an interpreter, right? I think the demand is going to be there. And we are in an industry that year over year has typically grown somewhere around 10 to 17% consistently, right? So
That's awesome. Yeah.
your livelihood is not going to go away overnight. Could it be affected? Yeah, heck yeah, it could, right? We're seeing unprecedented stuff. So I'll keep coming back to my same message and the one that Mateo shares all the time. Your livelihood is your livelihood. You've got to do the best you can to stand out, to market yourself, to build your skills, because if there are losses in the amount of services, companies won't just keep the cheapest because they'll fail. They're going to keep the ones that are the best, that provide the best services, the easiest to work with. Because I got to tell you what, having worked at multiple companies, I would pick the interpreter who was good and easy to work with over the interpreter that was good and not as easy to work with, right? So those soft skills, those professional skills are incredibly important. The ability to have a polite conversation, to know how to get what you want in a polite way, right? Like I always come back to one of my, I want to say favorite interpreters, because she took these lessons and ran with it. She was just always negotiating, always polite, always professional, always going out and getting new clients, right? And using that to negotiate with me, because if client X would pay her, I'm just going to make up an amount, 50 cents a minute, right? Whatever the rate may be, what would I pay her, right? So, and she would always come back, hey, I've been doing this for so long now. I've gotten this certificate. I've taken these courses. I've done this many hours. I've gotten, these compliments from these clients, some of which are you, right? Some of which are not you. What can I get, right? And she always stands out in my mind. She's still in the profession, still going strong, right? Because she markets super polite, says everything with a smile, right? Like really stood out. So she is the type of interpreter that will last, right? Whereas if cuts have to be made, if I'm surly, if I'm just really serious, if I'm kind of grumpy, if I am just average and meh, I don't really stand out in your mind, right? And what she did isn't what you have to do, right? Like you might stand out for something else. Like I see Mateos all the time, obviously on LinkedIn. I saw him on LinkedIn before we started collaborating, right? So he stood out in my mind, right? I had other interpreters. One looks like you know who Shia LaBeouf is?
I
the
have
actor?
no idea.
Okay, right. You look him up. Like there's an interpreter that looks exactly like him.
And that's
right?
the reason why you remember him.
Well, he's also really good. He was very professional, very polite, but he looked like him. There are interpreters that had like crazy red hair and other things that made him stand out, right? So for video, maybe not the best, but like really super polite. I had an interpreter that was willing to take a call at 3 a.m, right? On New Year's,
on the voice.
With a smile, and she stood out, right? So like, I mean, and you know who you are. So like those little things make big differences in my case, I was the client. I was the one purchasing services from these interpreters, right? Those people stand out. And we have really transitioned from this could be troubled and turbulent time to how to stand out, right? So
that leads me to a question now. That's very important. What is a motivation killer for you when you're hiring an interpreter? Something that you see as a major red flag. Like, oh, this guy, I cannot hire this interpreter with this attitude. Just so our audience can understand what they should avoid doing as a professional interpreter.
Well, I've been doing this for years, Mark. So you just have to take my word for it that I'm the best. I've never had a complaint. I've got 20 years of experience. I am just amazing. I am awesome. I mean, I want you to be obviously talking yourself up, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. The fact that you've been doing this for 20 years and have a very closed mind does not make me want to purchase services from you, right? Like, don't get me wrong. There are interpreters who have been doing this for 20 years and they have an incredibly open mind. They are still looking for feedback. They are still looking for me to tell them like what I would like different, or give them like quality tips, or, or will ask my opinion, right? Not anymore because I'm not in a company, right? But you get my point. So the closed mind, I'm the best ever. I've never had any complaint, and you can't tell me how to do things. Mm-hmm. I just don't love it. Right?
What's a problem? I see.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Burger King?
Sorry?
Are you familiar with Burger King?
Yeah, sure.
Their slogan is "Have it your way," right? That's what a client wants, their way. right? So
They're
you gotta
waiting.
find that out a little bit. Work with them.
Exactly.
Have an open mind.
So having an open mind, always looking for improvement and keep growing professionally and as a person as well, you would say that are the most important things to do if you want to stay relevant in this position.
100%. And let them see your value, right? Because all of those things are good, but if you're not advertising it in some way, shape, or form, if you're not marketing yourself, then you're doing yourself a disservice, right? Like, I'm not expecting to show up with, like I said, the red hair and like, hey, I'm the best, look at me, right? But like,
But I
hey,
would look nice with red hair. Let's be honest. My hair is growing a little more.
well,
I
with
would
your
look
part, you could do
fantastic.
2 color, man. You could do red hair on one, red on one side, and I don't know, you could do blue on the
I used
other.
one day in the past, I used to have a purple hair for a special occasion. Maybe one day I'm going to bring that picture so you guys can see it, but not today. Once we hit 3,000 followers, like here on LinkedIn, 3,000 subscribers, I'm going to reveal the day I had purple hair. All right. If you
That
guys
is
remember
awesome.
that, I'm going to reveal it.
That is great. Yeah, we could do another challenge later on. Like maybe like after we get a certain amount of subscribers, I'll shave my head or something. No, I'm kidding.
No,
I don't want to do that.
don't
I have
Don't do
hair. I
that.
want to enjoy my hair while I've got it, right? So
Hey, you got more hair now than you used to have in the past, man. Like, we got to be honest. When I look at your LinkedIn profile, you have more hair now. So what changed? More vacations?
lots of things changed, right? So I have more hair and I have less bags under my eyes. So I like, taking better care of myself, sleeping more, right? Like, I'm not gonna lie. This is my own hair, but it was a transplant, right? Like, it's just, you get older, you have to do things and you learn. And I'm not particularly vain, but it does make a huge difference. It takes years off of the way you look, and your image is important when you're going to go out and market
Absolutely.
yourself, or you're going to try to sell something, or you're going to try to build up clients, right? And I mean, we'll talk about my particular journey in other episodes, but I have multiple, I'm going to say companies, right? We've started multiple things, and my appearance is important because I'm the face of those things, right? Like, no offense, like, I may not be the prettiest face in the world, but if I was incredibly overweight, if I had no hair, if I had huge bags under my eyes, just pallid, right? And the reason I have a beard is because I have no jawline. So if I didn't have my beard, right, like, I could look much worse than I do, is my point. And none of those things are necessarily bad, but if you're going to be a public face,
That's important.
everybody knows who Thor is, right? Chris Hemsworth, right?
Yeah.
Which Thor do you like better? The overweight, heavy Thor, or the incredibly ripped, like, just masculine, manly Thor, right? Like, again,
Which
there's nothing
one would you
wrong with
want to
being
be, right?
overweight.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't make you feel the best. It doesn't make you look the best necessarily. And I'm going to get all kinds of cancel culture. I accept people as they are, right? I've been overweight.
I have a problem
No
with that.
judgment, right? But that doesn't mean that you want to stay that way necessarily. That is up to you.
Yeah.
Again, I respect your choice, but personally, I would prefer to continue to, I'm going to lift weights, get healthier, just do everything I can to not only extend my life, but extend the quality of life while I'm doing it. Man, you've taken me all over the place today, Mateus.
Yeah.
What's your next
That's
question?
the idea of this podcast here. My next question is, how can I become a millionaire as an interpreter in 1 year?
You can't. That is just not happening.
Such a
Right.
bummer. I thought you're going to have like a very amazing answer. I'm going to leave the podcast today and start a business with interpreting and become a millionaire. And now you're telling me I can't?
You, like, as an individual interpreter, you are not going to become a millionaire in one single year. That doesn't mean you can't become a millionaire in your work span. I don't want to say lifespan, in your work span, right? Because if you are wise with your money, if you make your money work for you, if you decide to increase your income through whatever of the various manners we've discussed, you can become wealthy as an interpreter, right? But I'm not going to become a millionaire as a teacher in a single year either, or many other, even as a doctor, in many cases, I won't be
It's
a
difficult.
millionaire, right?
But if you want to improve your finances, what do we offer to our community to help them improve their finances?
Well, we have something called Finance Fridays, which if you have joined our newsletter, you can get the newsletter there. And we are also posting on LinkedIn, right? We want to make sure that you can learn things that a lot of people aren't taught. Like, my parents didn't teach me, the school didn't teach me, right? I had to learn the hard way. but there's no reason to continue your life
Hard
like
way.
that.
Yeah.
You can learn from others, right?
Mark, there was one thing you did for me this year that was very helpful. I don't know if you remember because it was early when the year just started in January. What was one recommendation that you gave me? A book that you told me to read, and that was really helpful. If you can recommend that to our audience, I think that'll be awesome.
For sure. Well, first, I'm going to recommend reading and podcasts in general, right? Like this podcast, I hope is entertaining and interesting to you and gives you some practical tips.
I try my best.
Right? Yeah. But if you really want to learn, you need to continually feed your mind. So read books, nonfiction. They're called self-help, right? They you really need that much help. We all do. Professional development. And podcasts. But so the book I recommended is called You've Only Got 3 Seconds. And it's all about recognizing the rules of the game. Well, what are the rules of the game? Business in the United States works a certain way. People judge you whether you like it or not.
And it's tough, right? It's tough. The lessons there are tough to absorb, right? She's going to say some things that you might disagree at first, but take a moment to absorb and reflect, right?
100%, right? So if you have a chance to read the book, you've only got 3 seconds. It is great. If you have any questions, Mateus and I would be happy to discuss with you, right? And again, it's just have an open mind and learn because, there are certain things like if I was a basketball player, I would have to be a certain height. I am not that height. I cannot be a basketball player, right? I just don't fit that mold, right?
And are you saying society expects some sort of patterns and standards depending on what you want to do? There's this sort of expectation from society?
That's crazy, isn't it? Right? That we expect, our people that are our leaders to be polished and well-dressed and well-spoken, right? The people that
even though some leaders aren't, right? Like a leader that we talked today was not the best example. Theoretically, you should be.
I've said enough negative stuff, right? Like, we're good on that front. But you're right. Yeah, no. I mean, the leaders you tend to look up to are the ones that look the part, right? There's a reason that models are a certain height, a certain body, both male and female. I'm not trying to be discriminatory here, but there's a reason that when you look at our actors and actresses, like Tom Cruise, it's hard to tell you that.
I wish I were him. Yeah.
I mean, he might even be 60, right? Like, but he doesn't look like it, right? He's obviously an attractive fellow, like Brad Pitt, also Salma Hayek. You know who she is. I mean, there's Jennifer Aniston. I can give you examples from both genders, and I think we can all agree that they all look pretty darn good because that's their livelihood, right? They take care of themselves, and the good news is we can all learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And help you with your business.
Learn from that. Yeah.
Cool. We have run way over on this one. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to continue to do just random one-off episodes without guests because we hope you get value out of Mateus and I as well as our guests, right? And give you up-to-date news, up-to-date industry happenings, our opinions, and bring in stuff from outside of the industry, right? Because it's great to know what microphone, it's great to know medical terminology, but when's the last time you actually thought, what do I look like on camera?
That's tough. Yeah.
Yep. And
how can I
as you can see, I don't need any makeup. You don't need any makeup, but you can do lots of stuff like a collared shirt. There's a lot, like a nice background, really good equipment that I need to update, right? So yeah, Mateus, what
don't
about
disconnect
you, man?
in the middle of the podcast. That's very important. If you're running a podcast now, please don't leave the other host alone in the podcast. That's something that might be helpful in the future.
That could be. Although I was expecting you to take off and maybe sing some Beatles or something, go some full-on karaoke.
No, let me sing Beatles. Like, you can start the song and I will sing shortly after you.
No, our audience will flee in fear if I start singing. So we'll spare you all of that. Guys, if you haven't gotten our tech guide, please do so. Don't follow my example. Read it, use it, learn from it. Reach out to us. We welcome your questions and your suggestions. We have some really great episodes coming up. We have some special guests. We have one that is a longtime industry expert, really leading the field. She is on the Safe AI Council, or the task force. So if you have questions about AI that you would like to be answered, please email them to Mateus and I at the Interpreter Hub, which his email is just mateus@interpreterhub.com. Mine is mark@interpreterhub.com. And we would love your questions so we can ask them to her. We're not going to tell you who she is just yet. You'll have to stay tuned, but she's great. You're going to love that episode.
That'll be amazing. And don't forget to join our WhatsApp community if you want. I have heard from some people, and I have seen it, that we even have companies there. So if you might be looking out for jobs, looking out for tips to talk to a community of engaged interpreters, that's also a special thing that we have for our members. It's free, and you get the chance to meet more people like-minded that think the way you do, or maybe people that challenge your beliefs when it comes to interpreting, or many other topics that we discussed there. For our newsletter, keep watching the YouTube videos here, but don't forget the newsletter, because the newsletter is our direct communication channel with you. That's where we promote what is important, the mindset. We try to talk about our mindset here as well, but the newsletter is more philosophical, and I am writing something called IC Castles. So if you want to know what IC Castles is all about, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. And again, the tech guide is not free. It is free right now, but once we achieve 3,000 followers or subscribers or whatever, we are going to start charging for that. So don't miss out on our tech guide. Over 100 pages of content just for you, so you don't do the same thing Mark did here today.
Thank you guys so much. See you in the next episode.
See you guys.